Welcome, Dani, to today's podcast. We are incredibly excited to have our own performance-focused nutritionist sharing his insights with us.
Well, hi, Søren. Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure.
Dani, let's pick up where we left off last week and delve into the concept of food as fuel, its role as a conditioning agent, and its significant role in boosting recovery for optimizing performance. How do you go about that process? If you look at the macronutrients breakdown, so you're aiming for a certain amount of carbs, fats, and protein per day. We touched on some of them. How do we start to look at what we need? I mean, on a Sunday, you might be more active than on a Wednesday, or on a Monday. That could change every week. Or should we try to be a little bit more clever and know that I'm going to be sitting in the office all day today, so I need less fuel for that day? What's your take on this and recommendations?
The short answer is yes. If you match your carbohydrate intake to your activity level, then that's always best. That goes for your energy balance as much as carbohydrate needs, because they're directly related to the amount of exercise you do. It's important to note that the body doesn't push on reset at midnight and then everything starts new. Obviously, if we do a hard workout and if we empty our tank, meaning glycogen stores are really empty, typically if we bonk hard, then that takes easily 48 hours until we fully recovered, rather more. And that's why if you take one day off in your week, that doesn't mean that you need to starve yourself on your off days. I
think that's a really important point.
Yeah.
You know, because we all look at, maybe less now than it was 5+ years ago, where everyone was looking at professional cyclists, professional athletes online, and on their recovery days, you would see them eat non-carbo foods. I think a lot of people went down that rabbit hole, and it was not good to them at all. And they were all, I'm not saying they were bonking without on their rides, but you know, they were definitely not performing at their best.
Yes, especially important because we're obviously among cyclists is we have a very high expectation in terms of leanness and watts per kilo, meaning we try to keep our body fat percentage as low as possible, and that's a natural enemy of your hormonal balance. And this phenomenon that emerged about 8 years ago, so around 2015, is called RED-S, so relative energy deficiency in sports. And what it means is that after you've spent your calories on the bike, the energy remaining from your diet is too low to have your body doing all its maintenance work. So bone replacement, muscle repair, etc. And this has fatal consequences. Unfortunately for women, the negative consequences start earlier. So they have an irregular menstrual cycle or are amenorrheic. So the menstrual cycle comes to a stop completely. We get more prone to injury. We can get depressive symptoms. And we fall ill more often because the immune system is depressed. And often I see that athletes are not willingly underfueling, but they just underestimate their energy amount or their energy requirement. And something we only recently saw is that it's not only not enough energy in total, but also the lower carbohydrate diets. So if you're on a low carbohydrate diet, the risk of getting into the energy deficiency trap is even more dominant. And that's something I want to stress on, because especially cyclists that want to improve their fat oxidation capacities, they often push their low calorie or low carbohydrate rides to a really high extent, and that has a very high price. And you shouldn't do that too often. Or if you're already in a stressful job, you shouldn't do it, period, because the stress or the load compounded is already high enough.
It's already high, yeah. No, I can definitely relate to that, Dani. And it's something I always knew, even from the old days when I was racing my bike. But you can also just feel it yourself, you know, that you're just feeling that there's something that is off and you're not performing.
Yes, and that's an important thing. Obviously, yes, we match the amount of carbohydrate to the activity level, but we're often misled by, okay, this is a hard day, tomorrow is an easy day, and how long the loading or the recuperating of an effort takes is often misunderstood. So I would say, if you know that you're going out for 2 long days on the weekend, then you can easily start having a higher carb intake on Thursday night through Friday, because you fill up your glycogen stores, and then you're happy mostly Sunday afternoon, because you notice only at the later end of your effort, have I fueled properly or not? That goes for loading before a ride as much as during a ride. So if you notice it, it's actually too late. You know what I mean?
What is the daily recommendation of carbohydrate for a cyclist or an athlete?
An average recommendation is, for easy days, you're sitting somewhere around 3 to 4 grams of carbohydrate per kilogram body weight. On your average training day, where you're out there for 2 hours-ish, you're around 5 to 6 grams. On a very intense day, where you do quality and or longer rides, you're more in the realm of 6 to 7 grams. And then if you really want to load up, or if you really ride hard, then you're between 8 and 12 grams. And that's an area that we touched on in the Grand Tour stuff. It's not fun to eat 8 grams of carbohydrates.
No, I was about to say.
It's
and that must be difficult. And we should mention here, there's not something that people should go out and do starting from tomorrow.
Eating is kind of the part of your training regimen. Eating a lot, if you don't feel like, is necessary if you want to perform well and perform on an exceptional level. And one thing that's also very important that we haven't touched on yet is, obviously, cycling is a sport where gravity is really punishing you, meaning you need to be lean and light to be fast on every terrain. If you're not a sprinter, watt per kilos is super important. It's the measure that defines your performance and whether you're ahead or behind your competition. And here we see very extreme physiques, especially in pro cycling. I mean, you can tell you tailor the clothes for the pros, so you see how physique changed from a professional rider in the last 2 or 3 decades. And such a lean physique is not something I recommend for an athlete that's just riding for fun, because attaining it in a healthy way is super difficult, needs to be monitored properly, and is not something that goes well within, I would say, quality of living. And that's why I always try to give amateur athletes a bit of a peace of mind and say, look, if we focus more on training right, instead of losing another 6 kilos, which is hard and a potential risk for your health, then better off here.
You're right. Nutrition has definitely changed over the past 5, 10, 15 years. And nutrition nowadays, what I see with the professional athletes that we are working with, professional cyclists and triathletes, is, and you know this as well, is that nutrition is not separated from training plans. Today, the riders know exactly how much carb there is in the bottle or in the pockets, or how to refuel for tomorrow's race or training, even when they're home. And I think that's what a lot of amateurs probably, where they still need to be educated about their nutrition and the quality of the training and recovery. All this should start at development level, with the younger guys. What different types of training needs different kinds of nutrition. I mean, it's a big learning curve, just like everyday training.
Absolutely. And if you start early, it's like if you learn a language. At the beginning, you need to look up every second word, and it's very tantalizing. Right. And at some point, you become fluent. And that's the same thing with nutrition. And if you learn it early, and if I work with young athletes, then once they hit kind of the U23 or pro Conti level, then they know what they have to do, and they are on a much better level than we've seen the senior pros from today, because so much knowledge has emerged in the past 15 years. And also so many more sophisticated products that enable a proper fueling have only come recently to the market. So, Dani, in our everyday life, we make decisions, especially you said today, we got all the variables, we got all these fancy apps where we add in all our
daily notes and stuff. I mean, we make decisions based on how we are feeling and coping with stress, family, work, training. And when we come home, we rate the day and training in our own mind or take notes about how the session went or RPE. Should we be doing the same thing about fueling? I mean, did I think I fueled myself well today? Do I feel tired? Did I get enough energy into myself today? Is that how we're measuring whether we are being effective?
Yes, it's a very good way of assessing how was my fueling, was my performance even to the very end, and that goes for business as much as for your sports performance. Do I feel well? Of course, we can be exhausted after a good training or after a hard day of work, but we don't have to be kind of almost close to coma, headache, and almost fainting. So that's a good indicator. I would, though, put an asterisk on it and say don't over analyze it, because if you track your food, whether it's with a journal or an app, day in, day out, this is completely straight leading into a very fixed mind on food, a very disordered eating behavior. And I'd rather go and say, okay, I have simple goals such as, yes, I drink enough water during the day. I make sure I have good snacks and not just the candy bars that are laying around in the office. Then these are simple steps that you can take in order to improve your diet. And it doesn't need to be monitored and measured with an app, because the potential thought or accuracy that is missing in the app is misleading you as much. So one of the best things that we always have with us is appetite and well-being. And if you are more on that side and you gauge your day with these metrics, then you're definitely doing better.
So what about
one thing you said earlier is basically the most important point. If you prepare well, then your day goes better. Failing to plan means planning to fail. That's how the quote goes.
Correct.
And that's absolutely right for nutrition as well.
You're right. And it's so easy when you come home late in the evening, either after work, after a training ride, and just be too tired and, just really to cook yourself a good meal. But that could already have been prepped beforehand. I usually also, when I prepare my rice or quinoa, I always cook a bunch extra and I just have it sitting in the fridge, and then you just take whatever I need and I keep it there for 2 or 3 days. And it's easy to get around with, and,
so that's
other things
kind of the champion's toolbox that you're applying.
Yeah.
And also you can cook in one pan within 50 minutes a complete meal.
Correct.
If you know your ingredients, if you have your staple foods at home. And if you come home before you're hitting the shower, you just put everything on the stove, and by the time you're done, your meal is basically ready. That's how I make it to my athletes.
Yeah, no, you're right. So Dan, one thing that have happened to all of us at some point in our cycling or athlete career is bonking. So when hitting a wall bonking, let's say that you're even 1 or 2 hours away from home, what's the best way to pull yourself out of that and make sure you get home without having to call someone to pick you up?
I would say is that red soda pop can that you get on every gas station. No, basically Coca-Cola is a very good lifesaver in these moments, because it contains a lot of sugar. Obviously, it contains caffeine. Caffeine is boosting your energy metabolism as much as it fights the perception of fatigue in your brain, and so that leads quickly out of this kind of very faint state where you almost run around cross-eyed and can't turn the pedal anymore.
Yeah.
Basically, and that's what you referred to earlier, there are moments for elite riders where you want to ride on a low carbohydrate availability in order to challenge your fat metabolism. But that shouldn't go to the very moment that you bonk completely, because what happens is your cortisol level, so the stress hormone in your body, goes through the roof, and you want to avoid the stress, because that shifts your metabolism towards catabolism, so a negative state of your metabolism where you lose muscles, where you recover much worse than when you're well fed.
Yeah.
But if you hit the wall, make sure you get simple sugar, mostly through drinking, because then that's digested faster. That can be Coca-Cola, that can be what you often see in pro cycling is some sort of orange or fruit-based soda drink, because more fructose helps to replenish glycogen in the liver faster. So basically you can easily go for any soda that you can cope with. Make sure not to be overly carbonated drinks, so that you don't have to throw up if you drink a lot of gassy drinks.
Yeah.
I wouldn't recommend necessarily energy drinks of any brand, because they're not helping better than any other sweet drinks. And what helps as well is maybe add to your Coca-Cola a shot or two of espresso, and then you should make it home.
And I think it's also important here to underline that maybe for some people that you will never be empty of muscle glycogen. I mean, you always still have a little bit or some in your liver, because else I assume we would be dead otherwise. But
absolutely. But I mean, the reason why we feel so shitty is our perception, our awareness, our coordination relies on our blood sugar levels. And if we kind of really drive them south, we feel performance declining. And also the reason why we feel so bad or why we have to slow down is if we are relying on fat as a fuel, we need to get enough oxygen. And that's only possible depending on your fitness level, obviously. That's only possible if you turn down your RPMs.
Yeah, correct. How long does it take then to fill up a fuel tank after we're pretty much emptied it?
Longer than we think. I mean, if you fueled up before a long ride, let's say you plan a 6-hour ride on the weekend and you fuel properly before that, so you have your glycogen stores topped up and you empty them completely or 90% because you don't want to bonk,
right?
Then it takes easily 48 hours, rather 72, until you are on the same level. In order to avoid this, you need to make two things. You need to fuel better. So most casual riders, they start fueling, drinking their sports drink or eating bars and gels kind of 2 hours into a ride. But the hole or the damage that's been done in the first 120 minutes is something that you cannot catch up in the later hours of the ride. So it makes sense to start fueling from the very first hour on. That helps with recovery mainly. That helps with having the best last hour that you ever had on a ride.
Yeah.
And after the ride, as I said, have fast carbs in the recovery phase. So the first 1 to 2 hours after your ride, little but quickly digestible protein, not much fat, because that slows down how the energy reaches your system.
Yeah.
And keep eating carb focused for the next 24 hours in order to replenish what you've expended.
Yeah. Coming down almost to the end of this interview, the golden question here. We got these founding principles. We're understanding the varieties of food sources. So what do I eat for breakfast, lunch, and dinner during a regular training week, or maybe I have a longer event on the weekend? If you just can sum that up without going a little bit too deep into this, that would be fantastic for all of us, I think.
For breakfast, I would always start with a good portion of slow carbs. So let's make it oats, let's make it a whole wheat bread with enough protein, because the protein makes sure that the carbs are digested slower and that your satiety levels are better. And don't forget, you've slept hopefully 8 hours and your blood sugar levels is rather low when you stand up. So you need carbs and protein. And then throughout the day, make sure to kind of allocate your protein portions over the day. That improves protein efficiency in your body. And stick for your little snacks between the main meals, stick to slow carbs, to fruits, to nuts. So that also helps in having stabilized your blood sugar levels. And then as athletes, whether we prepare for a long weekend or we are in our everyday training process, make sure you have enough carbs as with your mains, so lunch and supper. Have whole food carbohydrate sources, the ones we mentioned earlier. And make sure they cover probably 50% of your plate. Then if you have this kind of individual plate separation, make sure about a third is fruits and vegetables. And then the last sector that's to be covered is your protein sources. And then with every main meal, obviously, at least one serving of protein in order to get these amounts throughout the day. And then something that is often misunderstood is you shouldn't eat too late in order not to compromise your sleep quality. But if you're moving regularly, there's no need to be afraid of carbs for dinner. So no need to cut out the carbs for dinner.
Point.
As long as you're not eating only ice cream or, basically sugar, but also kind of fiber-rich carbohydrate sources. You need this point of the day also to kind of top up your carbohydrate portion of the day.
Yeah. No, I think that is a good recommendation, and it's also easy for everyone, I think, to follow. I know it sounds simple, but sometimes you just need to get into, I think, the routine of just thinking also ahead how your week will look like and what you can do to prepare for the week. So maybe on your recovery day, you spend a bit more time pre-cooking, preparing the things that you will be eating during the week or at the office or at work. So Daniel, last but not least, are there any nutrition myths floating around that we should point out here just before wrapping up this episode?
I think I touched on a few. So like my favorite ones are keep on drinking milk if you're not allergic to lactose or milk protein. And again, that's very limited amount of people that are. Milk is a good thing. Gluten is not your enemy. Carbs are an endurance athlete's best friend if you go for the right quality at the right point of time. And in the Western world, or like, let's say, the developed world, where we are not having any kind of scarcity of food, we hardly ever have not enough protein, like from a general population point of view. But for athletes that try to be very lean, that are maybe plant-based, there we see that the protein amount is not enough, and that's detrimental to your performance. So the myth that protein is only for strength athletes, for the CrossFitter, the bodybuilder, whatnot, is definitely wrong, because what we try to achieve through endurance training needs protein as well, as we touched on earlier. Other myths, I'm not a big fan of time-restricted eating, intermittent fasting, or how you can call it as well.
Yeah.
Because for the athlete that trains regularly, the phases of activity is a more important Zeitgeber, so a more important point in your metabolic clock to dictate what you need when you need it, than to restrict your calorie intake window to whatever, 8 hours or what kind of number. And by reducing that time to a restricted number, you most often cut short on calories or best protein supply. And that's why for athletes, it's definitely not suitable.
It's not suitable, no. Hey man, look, it's been brilliant to get you on the Castelli Pod again, and I really appreciate everything that you're doing. I know it's hard to be specific, but the general comments you're making are really, really helpful to the people who are listening. And most people, we are in the same boat. A lot of us are uneducated, and it's people like you that can make everyday athletes become better versions of themselves, not only on the bike or in the run, but also in their everyday life. So if they're just willing to put the time into listening to the advice, So in the podcast description, I will track a link to your social handle and also to your website. So people can go and click there and check out more information.
I'm happy if I can shed some light on simple tips that can make athletes cope better with that.
No, we appreciate it. We appreciate it, man. Thank you so much. Thanks again, Dani. It's been amazing to have you on, and we hope that athletes continue to learn more of this stuff, including ourselves, because it's just so important. So, yeah. We hope that everyone, all the listeners here, you enjoyed this episode, and we'll see you on the next one. So, Dani, thank you again for taking the time to meet up.
Thank you, sir. Take care, eat well, and ciao, ciao.
Ciao, ciao. That's a wrap on this Sport Nutrition Recap episode with Dani Hofstetter. If you enjoyed the episode or missed any of our 4 sports performance nutrition episodes, they share so many great nutrition facts to help everyday athletes enhance their overall athletic performance and daily lives. Feel free to go back to November and December 2023 and give them a listen. And if you enjoyed this episode, make sure to subscribe, give us a 5-star rating to help us reach more cyclists through the algorithm, share a link with one of your best training mates. And also, if you would like to suggest a future podcast topic, just shoot us a line at podcast@castelli-cycling.com or connect with us on social media. I'll include Dani's contact details and other important information from this episode in the show notes. And on next week's episode will feature Justine Requiere, a Belgian star on the rise from the AG Insurance Sudal team. The 28-year-old has gone from being a professional trainer in a gym to beating the world's best female cyclist in just 4 years. So it's going to be an inspiring and entertaining episode, I promise you. Till then, take care and ride safe.